Thank you very much. A very good morning and Assalamualaikum warahmatullah to everybody on this Friday. I always wonder how I introduce a row of panelists when collectively we have over 100 years of experience. So it's a long list, but I think just to make sure that everybody knows everybody, I'm just going to start very quickly with the introduction, to a little bit of introduction to each panelist, and then I'll start questioning or interrogating them. No, I promise I won't interrogate, but the questions have all been pre-prepared and shared. To start off with, of course, I start off with YB Wong Chen. He's the third member of parliament and a former corporate lawyer specializing in mergers and acquisitions. And just a fun fact, YB, I just found out that we were born in the same hospital, Assunta Hospital. Yes. So, however, I wanted to point out to Madam Nurul Izzah, I did not go to Assunta School. I went to Sri Aman, the frenemy. So, just to call it out there because yeah, you called it out a few times, so I thought I'd put out Sri Aman there. But anyway, to go on, he has a degree from University of Warwick and currently wears various hats. Chairperson for the PSSC for International Relations and International Trade, chairperson for the Interparliamentary Union Working Group on Science and Technology, also chairperson of the APPGM for Political Science and for Malaysia Debt Ventures. And he's also a member of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, APHR. You can give a small applause for YB. Secondly, so it's good that we have quite a variety of panelists here. So the second one is from the finance sector. So Tuan Muhammad Nazir Omar is the Managing Director, Group Corporate Investment Banking for Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad. Prior to the merger, he was the CEO for Dana Jamin. His corporate career has always been in the financial industry, particularly in corporate banking and capital market, where he has served on various financial institutions such as Citibank, RHB Investment Bank, and Kuwait Finance House. Next, I welcome Encik Muhammad Irwan Aman. He's the General Manager, Sustainability at Sarawak Energy Berhad. He has over 24 years of work experience in power, utility, and clean energy financing sector, and is responsible for developing and implementing sustainability strategies for Sarawak Energy. Finally, my ex-colleague from the UN, we've known each other for a long time, Mr. Asfar Azam Kasbani. He's the director of the National SDG Centre, otherwise known as Pusat Negara SDG, under the Ministry of Economy. He has had an extensive career with UNDP Malaysia, where he was in various positions, including leading industrial and building energy efficiency programs, biomass power generation, as well as green technology for low carbon cities projects, amongst others. So I'm glad to be the only woman moderating a whole row of men. So that's a good balance. So I'll start with my first question. So it's open to all of you. Because I think when we talk about financing sustainability, partnerships is quite key in collaborations, because obviously financing huge projects requires quite a bit, and also sharing of expertise, as well as was alluded earlier. So in your respective roles and industries, could you share with us how multi-stakeholder collaboration plays a pivotal role in accelerating Malaysia's sustainability targets? So maybe we can start with YB. Maybe you can share a little bit, some examples.
Okay, morning. Thank you so much, Anita. Salutations first to Muhammad Farus, Mr. Farus Nada, and Mr. Kelikam, and also my dear friend Izzah. As a parliamentarian, of course, we are not directly involved in finance, but as the MDV chairman, we are at the forefront of renewable energy financing at a rate which is quite high. Unfortunately, we're like a mini Along. Okay, our rates are 8 to 10%, right? But essentially, stakeholder engagement at that level is quite clear. We try to get, at least from the Member of Parliament side, when I wear that hat, we try to get the government policy aligned, and NETR is a big thing coming next year. So we're really happy to see at the policy front that the government is interested in pushing for this agenda, right? But from the MDV side, we do the usual process of due diligence. We talk to the energy producer. We try to understand the market, which is really tenaga at the moment. Of course, Sarawak had their own structure. So I think that kind of engagement within the market itself, what they're willing to pay, and then understanding the cost structure of the producer of the energy, that's where we come in to play that role of bridging the loan, essentially providing project financing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And if I can move on to the next speaker, the panelists.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. First and foremost, thank you very much to the organizer for inviting us here to be part of this esteemed panel members. Being from Bank Pembangunan, we are a government-owned entity providing developmental finance for impact capital for developmental purposes. So being owned by the government, we are seen as the policy tool to help implement all the government policies, right? And that's our mandate, and that's our agenda. And in order to do that effectively, obviously, we have to work with the various ministries and agencies to identify what needs to be done. And that kind of engagement and collaboration goes back and forth. And one thing is when the policy is announced, but I also like to call out here that we would like to be involved as the policy is being made, in fact. Because that's the best time for us to provide inputs and feedback, and because we're going to implement it. We're going to fund it once it's announced and roll out. So how are we going to do that, right? And so that's pretty much the big picture, collaboration that we would like to see and we like to do. We've been doing that as well already all this while. Now, then I want to touch a little bit when we talk about this topic this morning. There's so many stakeholders involved when it comes to sustainable development. How then do we decide? Do we talk about the billions that needs to be raised? How do we prioritize the capital and has the most impact for the buck, right, so to speak? And so at Bank Pembangunan, we realized a few years ago that we cannot just evaluate all projects that come to us. We have to prioritize. And so early in 2020-21, we came up with this developmental framework we call Measuring Impact for National Development. So it's a framework for us to score, sort of in a layman's term, each project that comes to us to see where do they rank in terms of developmental impact. And so how do we come up with this framework? We take into account the SDGs for obvious reasons, but we also take into account Bank Negara's additionalities that they want to achieve. And to me, also important is the RMK 12, because that's where the government national agenda also comes in. And so we have to balance all this and put into this framework. And so when a client comes to us and say they want to build this project, and so to speak, so we have a series of all these questions that we ask and data that we need to get from them to score and see where they rank. So when the score is significantly high enough, okay, there's a buck for the developmental impact here that we should support. So that's the first thing, prioritizing. The second thing where this comes important is there are cases where the credit is not so great. It can be marginal at best. And so the board realized that we have to allocate some of our capital to take on some of this role. And so that's when we talk about this developmental impact, this framework, for us to decide, okay, it's not the best credit, it's marginal, but the developmental impact is strong enough that we need to support it.
I think that's a very important thing in a country like Malaysia. You can't have the same standards across. There needs to be a lot of support as well for such areas. Next, if I can go to the
thanks, Anita. First of all, Farouz, thanks so much for inviting Pusat SDG Negara, Ministry of Economy, in this session. We are in the era of Sustainable Development Goals, 2016 to 2030. Yeah? So if you go back to Millennium Development Goals, 2000 to 2015, that time most of the thinking was, the perception was the government will do the development work. So the partnership context, working together, collaboration is less in MDG compared to SDG. In Sustainable Development Goals, one of the piece or tonggak is actually on partnership. SDG 17 also stress on the role of the partnership that needs to be done. And partnership here is not just the government that you're looking like. It's actually private sectors, financial institutions, CSOs, academics, and each and every one of the demographics band, they have his own role to do that. Don't forget the youth, the vulnerable communities, and all those. Number one. Number two, if you're looking into some of the examples that the government has done, actually a lot. I can just relate one which is close to me, which is actually the establishment of Renewable Energy Act 2018, which was actually developed by a UNDP project, United Nations Development Project at that time, which I was actually one of the manager, was that in order for you to develop that kind of very complicated bill, it needs consultation with private sectors, financial institution, users, and everybody involved in that act. It cannot just be done alone. And then fast forward now, if you look into your TNB bills, there is 1.6% charge for tenaga diperbarui. Yeah, there are some issues about it. But point is, it is there. Do you think it is easy for the government to agree on that and TNB to agree on that 1.6% to fund renewable energy in Malaysia as a start? That requires collaboration and also partnership. So I stop there for now.
Thank you. And that's a sustainable model as well, because it goes and you don't really explicitly feel it as it's being charged.
Exactly,
as well.
exactly.
Thank you. Aaron, perhaps you'd like to share?
Okay, Assalamualaikum and very good morning everyone. Again, thank you to the organizer inviting us, Sarawak Energy. We come from quite far, from Kuching. Not that far lah, it's just 1 hour plus. All right. Again, when we talk about partnerships and sustainable financing, how we look at ourselves, because we are power utilities, we are vertical integrated companies that from project development up to retail. So throughout this value chain, there are a lot of areas that we can explore, all right? Be it during project development, be it during operation, be it with our SME or our vendors. So throughout the supply chain, there are a lot of areas that we can do or we can work with in the topics of sustainable financing. Be it we are negotiating with our investors, our sukuk investors, for example, whether SPT can be accepted, so and so on. So under the famous one now, everyone talking about scope 3. So how we can to alleviate our supply chain so that not only they are aware about ESG, but they are really internalize that into their operations. Okay. Now partnerships is a key to this. Each phases we have a unique partnership that we can work with. So that's how we look at things. So, hopefully we can create values, not only for us as a company, but to the states, to the country, and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to YB. Can you let us know, how does Budget 2024 align with Malaysia's sustainability aspirations? I mean, a lot of it has been discussed, but to get your perspective. And what additional measures would be useful to further advance the integration of sustainable finance principles so that Malaysia remains on a robust path towards achieving its sustainability targets?
Okay, as you know, the budget is, from a technical point of view, is just basically operating expenditure and development expenditure. So on operating expenditure side, ESG elements are still on the works. So, we have a massive budget, almost 400 billion. Now the operational side, perhaps the government can put an ESG report of some sort in the future. A couple of years ago, I worked with Tengku Zafro, he was then Minister of Finance, to get the budget, gender responsive budget element. So I think the DOE was, the Department of Stats, Dawson was supposed to work on it. But until today, we haven't seen the light of day. But what I'm saying is most corporations are putting up ESG report of some sort. I would like to see the budget Malaysia, at least on the operational aspect, to have a new element of reporting on those ideas. So that would be at least in line with the government's overall policy to pursue sustainability. Now for DE, this is where the government really has the power, 100 billion plus, to encourage sustainable projects. So how they break this down, again, we don't have proper reporting, which are really what we call ESG sensitive project to finance. But obviously, the big one is NETR next year. So it is going that way, that path. What we really need to do is to have a vision of the Malaysian economy, why we want to be 5 to 10 years from now. Sometimes it's encapsulated in the RMKs. But of course, we are taking midterm now, the new government. So I hope that in the next 2.5 years, when we get the new RMK running, RMK 13, we should set out the path of hitting net zero as soon as possible. Because the way I see it, to remain competitive in ASEAN, the most important thing is to hit net zero so that we can attract most of the hubs to be here. And the future is clear. With climate change as it is, the future is green tech is going to be the main driver for the next 10, 20 years at least. We want to be at the forefront of that, and I hope that as we, government budgets are yearly affairs, but we should get that trend moving in the right direction. So I'm pretty pleased with the budget overall. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I think you alluded to when you're creating a budget, and I'm quite familiar with the challenges with the gender responsive budgeting. What do you think are the challenges for governments or even other stakeholders to understand the issues? Because we all actually want to do and contribute. So I think what UN Global Compact is doing is very important in terms of providing training. But beyond that, institutionally, how do we make sure that everybody's on board on understanding the same terms? Because ESG is quite new as well, although it's not new in terms, right? So people get excited about it. Can you share some ideas perhaps on that?
It's not a secret that the government generally is a bit slower than the corporate side, right? So corporations like banks, Alliance Bank here today, corporations should actually invest a bit more money on their ESG reporting and their commitments, and then the government can take the cue. The government has 1.6 million civil servants. It's humongous. So it's easier that we look at a corporation maybe like, some MNC, right? They've committed to RE100. Look at what are they doing in terms of reporting. What are they fully like Parliament. Thank you to Tan Sri Jo, who is very committed to make sure that we have solar panels and that we are 100% renewable in the next couple of years. So I would say, look at the corporation, let them lead. We follow, adopt, and over time, the government can be much more responsive. But having said that, the government using its fiscal power, taxation and all this, you can actually encourage with incentives, tax breaks for companies to meet ESG ahead of the targets.
Thank you. I move on to Encik Nazri. So coming from the finance sector, could you share an example of financing a sustainability initiative? And what are the key drivers for identifying the right initiative, and how are suitable partners determined? Because, we talked about due diligence and, of course, looking at a framework, but maybe a little bit more detail, because in all talks that I go to, sometimes the devil is in the details of how to do things, right? Because we can sit here and talk till the cows come, but if you don't talk about the mechanics, then sometimes that's where the challenge comes. So just a little bit, yeah. Thank you.
Sure. I can share an example which is more recent. Earlier this year, we have financed successfully with our partner banks, the hydrogen tram, the first hydrogen tram in Southeast Asia, and that's in Kuching. When the client came to see us and we explored how to do this, obviously when we prepared the paper, the first question on all the credit mindset is it going to go into flames, right? Is it going to burst into flames? And is technology going to work, and how are you going to find the hydrogen? So the due diligence is going to be there. The obvious questions are going to be asked. And let's not try to hide from the fact that we have to go through that rigmarole and make sure we know what we're getting ourselves into, new technology especially. So at Bank Pembangunan, we have to work with partners. And so we have to find where the technology is readily available for the client, and we make sure that those technology has been tested and proven. So our technical advisors will tell us, whether this is good enough in terms of proven safety and so forth and so forth. So we need to rely on those consultants and whatnot, no choice. Then the partner banks, obviously because this came from China, we brought China Construction Bank. They are our partner bank in this. And of course, UOB was another partner bank because they also have the appetite. So that's how we crowd in, bring other partners as well. Rather than trying to do everything ourselves, we have to leverage off what we can as well and to make it work. And so that was part of the due diligence process, very significantly focused on the technology and the capability of paying back and so forth and so forth. And so you can't run away from that. And at the end, alhamdulillah, everyone bought the idea, and of course mentioned just now about the developmental impact, the MIND score. And when we presented to our committee, we expressed how important this is from the developmental impact. This is going to be our first hydrogen technology that we bring on board. So that's how we do it.
Thank you. And I'm just trying to understand from a developmental impact, is it possible to bring other stakeholders into that conversation? Because sometimes, as I've said this also before, impact can be felt on paper but not in real life.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can ensure that people feel that change?
So you're talking about other than the
Communities and
right? So in our Mind Score, we also take into account impact on communities. So the beneficiaries, who's going to benefit is other than the client themselves, obviously, but who are the benefit from the area, surrounding area in terms of job creation, in terms of cost of living, and so forth and so forth. You can't run away from that. You have to take that into account as well. There's going to be positive and negatives, right?
Thank you very much. Moving on to Encik Irwan, before I go back to Asfa. Congratulations on Sarawak Energy's pioneering step as the first corporation to sign the business ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius and its commitment to the science-based target to reduce corporate-wide carbon emission as aligned with the Paris Agreement. Yeah? Could you shed light on the linkages between finance and sustainability perspectives in creating synergetic efforts to achieve the business ambition 1.5 degrees Celsius, and why adopting the science-based target is important?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We signed up for science-based target in 2020, and our targets been validated and approved just recently. You can see how from 2020 to 2023. So that's the efforts or the been put in to really because we are a large corporation, to really understand the data, to collect the data and so on, to fulfill the science-based targets. But this exercise really teaches, really build the capacity within Sarawak Energy, and now we are quite confident how to go about it, and what sort of programs that we can introduce so that we can achieve these targets. For Sarawak Energy, we are signing to 1.5 degrees C business ambitions. That's mean near term. So hopefully, since this already been approved, so we already have the roadmap ready to be implemented, and then after this will be toward net zero, because in our commitment when we sign up, advocating net zero, that will be our commitment. Since the state already announced net zero for Sarawak, so then we should be aligning to state as well as Malaysia. If you talk about why science-based targets is important, because it's all about data. If you're talking about sustainability, if you want to improve, we need to have a proper data, we need to have accurate data that represent our operation, right? So that we know where we are and we know where we are going. To link it to finance, because earlier, if you talk about ESG, from a finance perspective, somehow we don't really understand how it link, right? Again, that's why UNGC have this program to educate on ESG. So basically, by adopting a standards, be it SBTI or be it in terms of reporting, GRI, TCFD, and IFRS, and so on. All these standards basically linking finance to risk, finance to climate change, finance to data, the sciences part of it. So I would like to encourage corporation to embark into this journey, all right? To embark and build your own capacity. For us, SBTI, we do it our own, using our own talent, our own capacity. So again, once we have all this, then it will be easier to move forward. In terms of, because sustainability, the main material issues now is all about climate change. Right? We foresee climate change will be the main requirement in the future. Right? Now we can feel that. BRUSA already introduced this. ASEAN taxonomy introduced all this climate change requirement. In our own state of Sarawak, last week introduced a bill, so a climate change bill. Right? So that's a lot. That's a lot. Then we as a corporate need to understand all this and how it will impact us. All right. Another one is CBAM. All right. So how that impact us, we need to be ready. So that's why for us, that's the linkages. It's not about finance. Okay. When we talk about climate change, the focus mainly on mitigation. Okay. But adaptation and resilience, not so much. Corporate don't talk about that topics a lot. So all this requirement as sustainability and finance, we need to look at not only mitigation, but adaptation. How company your operation been impacted by climate change? We need to be ready. Okay, and then how are we going to build our resilience? That's what really the linkages between finance and sustainability, so that the company prepared themselves. It's a long-term target. It can't be done in 2 to 3 years' time. Long-term, what sort of investment we need to put in, be it technology, all right, and so on. What sort of capacity development that we need to introduce within the company, our people, and so on. Transition from high-intensive carbon to low-intensive carbon. Of course, there's technology involved. What sort of intervention that we need to do, investment, and so on. So it's preparing us to think forward, okay? So that in a long run, we know what we're going to do. We know what kind of risks that will impact us in the future. That's, I think, the perspective between financing and sustainability, which is the one that are quite critical. But if you talk about sustainability, there are a lot of topics that we can cover. So I think that's the main one. Thank you.
Thank you, Encik Aran. Asfar, on to you. So the National SDG Centre serves as a hub for engaging various stakeholders. And, as we all know, a lot of us are doing a lot of things. But the question is, how do you bring that all together in terms of reporting and bringing people together, especially under the National SDG Centre? Maybe you can share some of your plans, because it's quite a new centre. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. We just had our Majlis SDG Negara meeting here, actually in Parliament, which was chaired by the Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri. So the Majlis is the highest governing council in terms of SDG implementation in the country. Underneath the council, there is the steering committee meeting chaired by Yang Berhormat Menteri Economy, Rafizi Ramli. And underneath that, actually, we have a technical committee chaired by the KSU of Kementerian Economy. But then we are also supported by seven working committees, which represent some of the sectors in the SDG implementation. From inclusivity, from sustainable financing, but MOF is chairing that. SDG localization by KPKT, and we have also private sectors. Faros is also one of the co-chair in that, and also one of the other one is actually on from the CSO NGO sides. So what I'm trying to say is that from the Prime Minister's perspective, he should be when we go into council, he should be able to see what's going on SDG matters. Including ESG. We did discuss about ESG also, how it relates in terms of supporting the SMEs in the countries and all this. The other one which I would like to also share is that SDG or ESG is not something different. Actually, it's part of our work. It's part of 12 Malaysia Plan. YB talk about the budget for 12 Malaysia Plan, those kind of things. So the budget used for the development period is actually SDG financing for the country, put it that way lah. So whether it's OE or whether it's DE, is being used to achieve the development purpose of such. For SDG. Then on the practical side, the SDG is always seen like G2G thing, but we in the industries, I'm as a pasar malam trader, for instance, what is it for me? How do I relate this to me? How do I implement this? So from the industry side, it's actually ESG. If you're a public listed company, you can, Bursa has guidance on the sustainability reporting and all those. And then, and one of the, if you look into the ESG sustainability guidance, reporting guidance, it mentioned about those how you should be start reporting the ESG matter on the E, S, and also G, the 11 teams and all those. And you'll be surprised that it's not just the environment that we are looking at. It's also a misconception that when we talk about sustainable development goals, it's always about environment. But it is not. SDG, only 7 actually environmental goals, but the rest actually are either social, governance as well, right? And if you link this back with ESG guidance, you will see that by Bursa Malaysia, you will see that the first one is actually anti-corruption. And number 2 is community engagement, community stakeholders. So environment comes later, 3, 4, 5, biodiversity and all those. So what I'm trying to say is that the structure of working together is there, is already there. And how it is then get reported is something that each and every one of us have to do.
Thank you very much. Going back to you, YB. So we talked a lot. I mean, Madam Nurul also alluded, and we've heard this, that we always work in silos. Although, of course, the SDG Center is trying to coordinate that better, and that's why it was formed. But as the chairperson of the Special Select Committee on International Relations and Trade, you oversee the work of 3 ministries, each with its distinct role in the country's relations and trade with other nations. Could you provide examples of successful collaborations between your committee and the various ministries that you oversee that have contributed specifically to sustainability practices or finance?
Okay, well, there's a misconception that we are collaborative, so to speak, with the ministries. We actually monitor ministries and we try to develop policies on and use the legislators to pressure the government to go in a certain direction. As you know, the committee is made of 9 members, 6 of them from the government and 3 from the opposition. So the committee works in a function of trying to see what is best for the country, may not necessarily be aligned with the government policy. But thank God, this current government, we are more or less aligned to issues. But my ministry really looks at trade agreements. That's under MITI. Under the Economic Ministry, of course, we are very keen on FDI coming in terms of technology, more so for things related to ESG, or at least for the main purpose of environmental and sustainability goals. So we host a lot of chambers. The Swiss chamber came 2 days ago, but we've seen the American chamber, the China chamber. We're having meetings with the Korean, the Japanese, German, and in addition to that, we also meet all the ambassadors who also have a trade wing. Most of the embassies will have one. I think we've done about 58, 59 embassies already. So we get feedback, we tell back, every meeting we conclude in the committee, we write back a report to the government. But we are pushing an agenda for NETR next year, specifically from my committee. So I think we are a feedback mechanism, because sometimes it's very hard to meet ministers. So we support the government on those bases, but we are also mandated to be critical. We're not supposed to go too much into governance issue, that's PAC matter, but we are supposed to be neutral and push an agenda that is fully supportive of government, I suppose, to some extent. Yeah.
Can I ask, because I mean I've been involved in a lot of this kind of discussion, how do you push from recommendations to implementation? Any tips on that? Because we all are in that space, right, of how do we influence?
Absolutely.
Maybe some tips on that.
So you hope that the Prime Minister calls you for a meeting, then you're going to sit down half an hour and have a chat with him. But generally, we do write a letter after the meeting and say, look, we have this problem here. Can the ministry look into the matter? We do get, because we are center left, I mean PKR, especially my party. So we do have a lot of links with the NGOs. They come and try to lobby us a certain view. So we take those, we give them the time, the space to conduct a hearing, to give their opinion. Then we write back to the government and say, have you heard about these guys? Are you engaging them? Are you talking to them? Right? We don't have the liberty to hire professional writers. We don't have the budget yet. The select committee system is relatively new in Malaysia. So hopefully when we pass the Parliamentary Services Act, parliamentarians will get a bigger budget and a much more better organized parliament system, then perhaps we can play a bigger role in policy making. Until then, I think this is mostly a feedback mechanism, assisting the ministers and also sometimes making critical comments and suggestions to ministers. So, susah. It's not easy.
I think you alluded to, engaging and reminding as well. So some of we can't give up as well, right? So it's consistently same messages over time. Yeah.
So we send a letter out. 6 months later, we'll send a reminder letter. Have you done something? Because this is the system I learned from the Public Accounts Committee when I was there, right? They are supposed to give an answer. But again, ministries are busy. They are also, they're also trying to suss out how to relate back to us. They're also testing our capacity and power. So we have a new terms of reference for committees, which is much better than the last term. So we have the power to summon the minister, and he has to come, right? We have the power to critically assess ask the KSU to explain further. I think we had quite a tough one with MITI a couple of weeks ago, right? So we are, I would like to say we're independent to some extent, but we can have some say. And hopefully over the years, as Parliament become more, ironically, we are talking about ESG like governance, right? Basic governance issue. Parliament must be sovereign in the country and it must be able to speak for legislators. So government of the day will need to engage us further. And and where things are wrong, especially in issues of corruption, abuse of power, the committees have that duty to check them. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to leave some space for Q&A, but I'll open the last question to everybody. Because I think we always talk about partnership collaborations, but I think we need to hear more good practices and examples of actual models working. And why I also brought up the question before is because, again, in many forums, I get young people coming up to me feeling frustrated and saying that, how do we persist this? That's why I asked that question. But more than that, some more good examples of multi-stakeholder engagement and actually producing something positive would be quite useful. Just a quick one, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Thank you.
I don't want to hog the mic, but we are politicians, right? I think that the main point is this. For financing, and we are bankers here, we work very closely, Bank Pembangunan, MDV, right? And for energy people down there, the fundamental thing is this: if you really want to change this world, you want to make it better, ESG, it has to be the reasons we face, all the problems we face today is really about consumers and also the production of goods and services. If we stand a chance to make renewable energy work, for example, or anything else, it has to be bankable. I think sometimes we miss the point. We listen to the NGOs, but if we cannot pay the renewable energy sector a fair rate to make it work, it's going to be talks. We're going to have another 200 forums like this and nothing will get done. It has to be financially viable, and the government, they control money. They can push money to certain development expenditure and direction. And corporations have this great duty because they are richer than the government by a factor of 10 to 1, right? So we are supposed to tell you to do your job. The government is supposed to tell the private sector to do so. But ultimately, the economy works on profits, right? The distribution of profit is the role of government. After you make profit and pay the tax, it's our duty not to steal that money and distribute back to the people. But we can run policy to force you to do the right thing under ESG.
Yeah, so what we touched upon bankable projects, right? And there's a leeway for me to just slide in here. There are always marginal projects. There are marginally bankable projects. And when we say that, that means the debt cannot be sustainable at a high margin of financing. It cannot be 80% debt financing. It has to be a lot less in order for it to be sustainable. So the issue then for most promoters, for most corporates is equity. Where are you going to get the equity then, since the bankers say that debt can only be supported up to 70 or 60%? And so that's part of the role that I think we have to also think about how to solve, right? And as developmental institutions, we also have a play role in terms of risk sharing. So at Bank Pembangunan, we already started thinking about private equity that we're going to start rolling out next year to provide some support, but it cannot be significant. It's just obviously not big enough. So this is where our thinking is the next level when we talk about blended finance is to bringing other parties with different type of agendas or different type of risk tolerance or risk returns to participate in the equity portion. If the project is ESG compliant, is a high developmental impact, can we not tap on the corporate CSR or funds that they have, foundations out there that's looking for places to place this up? And the only problem is they don't know what projects and who's going to govern it. They're worried they put the money and it's all gone. So maybe that's where Bank Pembangunan can play a role. We will be the governance in terms of this project can be done. We will monitor it for you, as you're going to provide the debt anyway, right? But we need help on the equity. So long as your equity return has to be realistic, that's why I say CSR, right? Maybe zakat. And in fact, maybe we should work with people involved in wakaf as well to provide the equity part. And this is where I think the collaboration and working with other stakeholders to provide the solutions. Yeah?
Thank you. Asfar?
Is always trying to find the sweet spot between economic, environment, and also social. If we are focusing too much on economic and putting less issues on social and environment, is also not the right way, So the future development model should look into those kind of criteria. Maybe the dots will moving sometimes here, probably depending on the government who will govern in that kind of thing. So. And how we see is always beyond income, beyond economic, especially at the rakyat level. So we talk about Madam Nur Izzah just talk about multidimensional poverty. So it's not just the income that we should be judging. It's also about their health, education, the environment, infrastructure. The orang asli, the schools are like 3 kilometers away, and of course they have less ambition to go to school. Those kind of things. How do we then address those? So in Pusat SDG Negara, working together with other ministries, we are also developing and also promoting this idea about beyond GDP. So we won't be happening tomorrow. Definitely, it will take some time. But it will not go like Bhutan. Like happiness index, that kind of thing. There is already things being mooted now, like Malaysia well-being index and those kind of things. So we are thinking along that line as well. So it's not just the income that we're looking at. It's not just economy that we are focusing on. We should also looking at other sectors as well, other dimensions as well.
Thank you. And lastly,
I think first point, I totally agree with what YB mentioned. It should be make sense in terms of financial part of it. So again, in our definition of sustainability, all right, it must create values to all stakeholders based on leveraging on real business values. Right? We need to really assess whether it's bringing positive benefits to everyone within our stakeholders, interact with our companies, and then it should be based on real business values or leveraging on real business values. If it's not based on real business values, then it's not sustainable. All right? We can have one-off philanthropy. So what's the impact? It's not there. So partnerships is quite a big word. And then for us, I think from my own perspective, the key pillar to partnership is basically getting like-minded people or like-minded corporations that have a shared vision in championing ESG or championing climate change, for example, and try to work out something with the partners. You become partners. Sometimes bringing people outside is quite easy to convince people inside or within the corporation. So having this alliance, build as many as possible, like-minded people, like-minded corporation, like-minded NGOs and so on, to support in this journey. All right. I think I need to mention this. Okay, the partnership that we have with UNGC, with Alliance Bank. Okay, how we going to alleviate our SME performance? We started last year. When we start with this awareness program and so on, everything provided free to our SME. We invite 100 as a start. You know how many turn out? 3. We organize in a very high, reputable hotel so that we can attract. Because we want them to, because they need to improve themselves, then they will part of our journey, especially on scope 3, only 3. But last Monday, we had a program, we invite 77, and 54 of them completed the assessment reports. Because assessment report, there is assessment developed by GC, so we understand where they are in terms of their readiness against ESG. So we as a corporate able to pinpoint for these sectors, for these vendors, this kind of program that they should have, or we can support. So that will create a long-term impact. So they are ready, they are future-proofing their business model and so on. So again, that's I think some points that I would like to share about partnerships in terms of sustainable financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I think we learned a lot today. I want to give a few minutes. We don't have that much time, but I believe some of you would have asked your questions through Slido. If I can see the question on the screen, and I'll read them out and see if it's addressed to anybody in particular. Okay. So there are a few questions here. Okay, so the first question, if operational expenditure and developmental expenditure both earmarked as SDG financing for the nation, how is the mechanics to map it to the specific SDG goal that would allow for accurate impact reporting? I think that's quite a popular question. Maybe if somebody could share.
Me
first, then
YB
Asfa?
first. Okay, all right. We have started the budget taking process. Just to let you know, it's a pilot phase still. So each and every ministry, when they use the fund, when they report back the utilization, they will then need to tag according to the to the platform. It's called budget tagging primary as well as secondary. Sometimes you see only is about SDG 5 on gender, but actually it does cover on other aspects as well, SDG 1, poverty and others, right? So it has started. It has not been fully grown yet. I will put it that way. But I see that is already this. Eventually, we are hoping that once that system is done, when the implementation is fully understood by the users, which is the ministries and the other departments, hope we are able to get a full picture of how the impact on the financing has been done related to SDG.
Maybe?
Okay, yeah, very quickly, right? OE, operating expenditure, we have 1.6 million civil servant. I don't know what the number is. Could be more than half are women. So that's a take for your SDG on women empowerment, right? So basically, it's about collation of data. And I understand YB Rafizi is leading the push for a new system to collect data, PADU. PADU. That is really excellent. This is what we call evidence-based or data-driven policy making, right? So, but we also need, the government in particular need to do a bit more in terms of gathering physical data, like from satellite imagery, right, to track all sort of things. Say we encourage durian plantation, a popular thing last few years ago, right? How many forests did we cut down in the process, right? What does that translate in terms of earnings for exports? So all these kind of things will need to come in, and the reporting has to be more beyond just data and calling people and getting opinions and feedback, but also increasingly a requirement to get more physical satellite-based data. So I think those kind of things could really improve a lot on reporting and analyzing which direction are we really going. Are our emissions really that high, or are they being suppressed? Our sinks, our carbon sinks, are they really optimized? Because ultimately we are all part of the world. We all have to be part of the net zero game, so to speak, or direction that we have to go. Yeah. So clearing up government's position on all this kind of thing and mechanics how to do it. That's how we should go forward.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. So somebody asked, there appears to be too many policies and plans by different ministries being published. How can these policies be simplified into action to be implemented by businesses? I don't know whether there's an easy answer to that, but I can understand, because a lot of sustainability officers are getting, I think they're overwhelmed by all these different things. So maybe some discussion around that.
We're talking about specific policies on ESG, right? Yeah. So I think for a start, the ministries, certain ministries will be definitely at the forefront of ESG reporting. Some are not. Like women ministry, that's the easy one, those with community or that. So they have to spend a lot more. Whether they get I don't think there's a cookie cutter version, Okay, so women ministry probably need to spend a lot more on their reporting, right? For business, how can this probably be simplified, be implemented? Actually, we're looking for the business to lead us on how to report this kind of thing, right? So that's my answer to that.
Can I also come in? Yeah.
From the business perspective, you can share.
Wanna...
I mean, are you finding that all these different policies are difficult to implement, or what are your challenges or opportunities in terms of
policies are
areas?
giving directions, right, to the businesses, so that the businessman knows what's important for the government. And the next question will be, okay, then what are the incentives? That's always going to be the next question, right? Or what are the regulations that's going to prohibit my business or impact my cost? So just focus on the incentives and the cost implications. That will be the simplest solutions, right? And they publish enough, and Big Fours already has summarized all the tax implications, the investment tax allowances and whatnot that the government is giving in terms of incentives, financing incentives as well. So that's first, what is the government trying to achieve? Obviously, net zero, SDG, whatnot. Okay, then how do I then achieve those within my ASP of area, right? Then look at the incentives that helps you to achieve that.
Thank you. And just one last question, because I think this is particularly for Encik Erwan. So science-based targets initiatives seem like a complex endeavor. How would smaller companies be able to achieve this or be able to do this? Especially, how would they be able to partner, or who would they be able to partner in order to do this here for Encik Erwan?
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that question. Yes, normally if you talk to SME, if you talk about SBTI, you need to do reporting and so on. Everything is so difficult. But in fact, we have done it. For example, right? We validate our data. We know where's the targets. One of it to reduce our scope 3 on voluntary basis, because our scope 3 is only 20% of the total emissions. What we want from the SME just to report their scope 1 and scope 2. Do you know how big is the data required for that reporting? For SME, we're talking about SME. Just their energy consumption and their fuel consumption for their operation. Only these two data. For big corporation, yes, it's quite complicated. But for SME, even sustainability, SBTI requirement, they're standard for SME. All right? So that's why we see this. Just that how we're going to help them so that they understand this. That's why we have all this, we're working closely with UNGC. Definitely we have program for our vendors, for our SME, but the outcome of this initiative should not be benefit just Sarawak energy vendors, but it also can be used throughout Malaysia. So that's the thinking that we have. Be it the Maju framework, be it on the START program and so on. So we work something, yes, of course we need to prioritize our vendors, but definitely whatever we develop should be practical enough for our vendors and should be practical enough to all vendors around throughout Malaysia. So we are helping our vendors in having a guideline or we call notice standards, guideline and procedures for them to venture into sustainability or venture into SBTI. So once they report to us, it's a simple one. The data they need to report to us. So I think moving forward, SMEs should not think that it's quite complicated. In fact, if you have any any question, whatever, on the journey for sustainability, please get in touch with Sodar Fairuz in the team. So they have a lot of toolkits where that toolkits can help our SME. All right, thank you.
Okay, I've been given the red card, but I'm going to be an aggressive footballer and ignore the red card for a bit because YB has asked me to ask the last question. Just 2 minutes, YB. What are the next expected outcomes of the NETR in the next 3 to 5 years? Thank you.
Okay, the most important thing I understand is it's going to be a single buyer for the NETR renewable energy. That is important because with the single buyer, there will be certainty so that Bank Pembangunan and MDV can also finance NETR, right? So there will be a fixed rate, hopefully a much higher rate than what it is. And then when they sell to the user, part of which is going to Singapore, we hope to get a lot more money from that side. And then that money, that profit for the government is going to be used to build a grid. And that is the important thing we need to understand. You don't build a grid, you can't be a key player in Southeast Asia. Singapore is the El Dorado, that's the big market. But we can, with the grid, supply Laotian hydro all the way down the line to be used by us and also by Singapore. So I think what I'd like to see next few years is it takes 3 years to build a power plant. I'd like to see a lot of power plant coming up, then the grid being fixed in the next 5 years or so.
Thank you very much. All right, that's it for this panel. A round of applause to all the panelists. I hope you learned a lot as I did today. Thank you very much.